welcome to the Gaming Lariat Podcast. I'm Walter Yeates, and Jonathan Ridgway is here with me, and we're launching our podcast for the first time. It's our first episode. And Jonathan, how are you? I guess it is early morning for you.
Yeah, I was just about to say good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I don't know which way it is, but it's a way. Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm ready to pump through it. It's the beauty of you being in the US and me being in the UK. It's always quite the time dysphoria, but we'll be all right. We'll get through it.
Yeah, it is getting late here as well, and yeah, we've gotten new things on our Gaming Lair website, and we're going to start off with that today. We recently published an interview that Jonathan did with Symphony of War, the Nephilim Saga developer Phil Hamilton, and Jonathan, I'll let you take it from there and talk about that and how everything went.
Yeah, well, Symphony of War, you reviewed Symphony of War, didn't you? And it was the first review for the website, so it felt appropriate, really, that we'd reach out and see if we could get an interview with Phil. I thought it went really well. It's our first kind of recorded game audio interview, if you want to call it that, because we've had a few, developer interviews, either published on the site we've got ready to launch in regard to articles. It was good chatting with him. I was interested in learning quite a few things, because the game Symphony of War, for people who don't know, Symphony of War Nephilim Saga is a strategy RPG. It's inspired by games like Ogre Battle, Fire Emblem, and Advance Wars, and a few others out there. It's done incredibly well. When it launched, if you look on Steam now, it's overwhelmingly positive. Over 2,000 reviews, which is a indie game developer's dream, pretty much. But interestingly, it was developed in RPG Maker, so I had an opportunity to chat with him about that. The reason he decided to, him and his co-developer, two of them developed it. The reason that they decided to develop it in RPG Maker, they really broke that engine down, made a custom engine using it. And we chatted about a number of things, working with a publisher. They worked with Freedom Games. So it was interesting to see him lift the lid a little bit on that, working with them, continuing to work with them. Localization plans, now that the game's been a success. They've got it out in English now, but they plan on getting it out in a host of other languages, which is great. Potential porting plans in the future. It's always a developer's dream, that is. But yeah, I think it was a really good chat. It's available on YouTube, on our YouTube site right now, and there is an article, but the article is kind of a bit of a smaller summary with a few quotes from him, but I would recommend checking out the full audio on YouTube. I'm happy with it anyway, even though at the time when I was recording it, I did have COVID. Don't worry, it was recorded remotely. I didn't give it Phil. He's all right, maybe. Anyway, I haven't heard from him since, so maybe he got it through the interwebs, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, and for everyone that does not know that you are also a developer as well, I'm kind of on the reporting side of things, and from that aspect, being a developer and seeing that show and seeing the development process, because I believe he said that it took over 6 years to make Symphony of War, the Nephilim Saga, and yeah, how do you relate with that?
Well, I mean, largely the reason it took over 6 years was because they were working on changing the RPG Maker engine to suit a strategy tactical RPG that they were making. So if they were using RPG Maker and making your typical turn-based RPG, it wouldn't take them 6+ years, at least based on the scope and everything else. But as I actually spoke to him about this, and one of his answers, like now they've got that custom engine in place, one thing that RPG Maker is really good for is producing content really quickly. So they don't expect the next game to take 6+ years. Most likely, they'll be working on Symphony of War 2, and he says he expects that to be around 2 years, because the infrastructure's in place. So I can sympathise with him. Like we've been working on a game for a similar time frame, six or so years, and you have to build everything from the ground up pretty much as an indie developer. I mean, well, you have use of the game engine, which is a tool that can aid you in some way, but in terms of asset creation and whatnot, that takes a lot of time, especially when you're a small team and we're a 3-person team. They were a 2-person team. That's full time. The team, that's the full-time team. And then you use contractors, like for example, the composer, it's a freelance composer. He's not on the project for 6+ years. He's on the project maybe a couple of months in total or something like that, right? At most. And then you have like freelancers. Maybe there's a character artist, portrait artist. For example, with Symphony of War, he brought in a freelancer to do the portrait suite of the characters. So when they're talking, that kind of visual novel, Fire Emblem presentation, they're talking, there's a dialogue box, and then there's a character piece, a character portrait piece. So he hired a freelancer for that, or many freelancers. I presume it was one, but I didn't clarify on that. But, so that's the kind of structure and the full-time team that you have. You've got to build things, the asset creation from the ground up. Now, if it's your first game in its style, it's a challenge. It takes a lot of time, a lot of R&D. Even if you're using a game engine, you're trying to get things working how you want them to work. Now, if again, like ours is Life Sim RPG called Brighter Life. You can wishlist it on Steam. If we were to make Right of Life 2, for example, it wouldn't take nearly as long to develop as this one has, because we have to build everything. So, I mean, I empathize with him in that sense. And but I mean, he's also partnered with a publisher in recent years, Freedom Games, and everything fell into place for him. I mean, I spoke to him about it. I was like happy for him as someone that's also in the trenches. The dream really is to be able to work full time on your own projects, and that's what he has moving forward as of right now. It's something we dream of. We work full time at our studio, but we don't work full time on our own projects because we have to earn money, we have to pay bills, we have to keep a roof over our head, and to do that we take on client work for hire projects. So those can, we've done many games, but not necessarily games that are our own IP. They're like, educational games for schools, or I've done a game for the NHS, which is the National Health Service in the UK, doing motion control stuff with the Microsoft Connect for stroke rehabilitation patients, stuff like that. All sorts of different random stuff that you do, but you do it for a client and they pay you, and then you can use that money to pay your bills, reinvest in the business, and work on your own stuff. So it's an interesting business model, to say the least. But yeah, that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely insider knowledge on that I can relate from working on my own creative stuff. It is definitely a struggle. So, and that's why we kind of wanted to focus on indie developers and get them a spotlight when we can, because it's not easy to put it that way. And to switch over.
I mean, just to go on that, it's not easy, and it's there are so many projects that get started that might have a lot of potential but never see the light of day. You never hear about cancelled projects or projects that people put up and they just don't get the funds to further pursue it or anything like that. Yeah, so there's many ups and downs as an indie game developer, definitely. Sorry.
And I guess that's a good transition into a non-indie developer, and Nintendo, who released their quarterlies last a couple of days ago. And yeah, when we look through those, I mean, there's a lot of negatives as far as the net sales going down, operating profits going down, a lot of things going down, the sales of Switch going considerably down a lot. But it's when you really look at the actual figures and the numbers and what Switch, especially with the Switch, what they expect to do, Nintendo expects for sales this year, about 21 million. Nintendo's fine. It's just there was a lot of things going on, especially in the United States with inflation and all that, and gas prices, and COVID still having an effect on the economy around the world. So it's all understandable type of losses when you look at it. But yeah, it's just one of those things. And I know we were speaking about before, like Xenoblade 3 is coming out and Splatoon's coming out, or Xenoblade 3 already came out and Splatoon's coming out in September. And so I mean, there's definitely things that they have on the docket that are definitely going to help their figures.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note that the way it's down is in the sense they're comparing it to the previous quarter. So the previous fiscal year's Q1, this report is. Yeah, I mean, it's down in the sense compared to that, but it's still pretty great. And they actually attributed, they specifically attribute the semiconductor shortage to affecting their production. in the first quarter, which they use as the explanation for the hardware decline year on year. Yeah, and I think when I look at the things coming up later this year, I mean, Splatoon 3 is a huge release, especially in Japan. Splatoon 2, the sales would blow your brains. So I expect Splatoon 3 to be a large, like a big success and a big system seller as well, especially if they bring out a certain edition for it or whatnot. I'm just trying to quickly just double check. Yes, so like Splatoon 2, over 13 million copies sold. It's unbelievable, really. That would be the best-selling Final Fantasy, just to put it in perspective. So, and well, the Splatoon 3 and the other big one, obviously, that we also saw a bit of yesterday at the time of recording this, was the new Pokemon coming out, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So that's later this year as well. I believe it's November. Just trying to draw from my brain when I think it's coming out. So that's another huge. I mean, that all Pokemon, especially a main series release, is going to be a big hit. Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them hitting their 21 million estimate, even if the first quarter was a little lower than they expected this fiscal year so far. I mean, yeah, I don't really feel like it's like there's no doom and gloom about it at all. It's still pretty frightening that the numbers that the Switch is achieving, over 100 million. I think I read a report the other day that was that it's on pace to, if it continues the route that it's at, it's sold more than the PlayStation 2 had at its current point in its life cycle. So if it continues at this pace, it will actually surpass the PlayStation 2, which is the best-selling games console of all time, over 150 million. So if it achieves that, I mean, it's pretty unreal, right? Like, incredible. They've struck gold with this hybrid sort of home console docked version and the handheld device. I mean, I can't imagine a future Nintendo console not having this feature. It's one of those where you just wonder how life was like it before it. It's just like, wow, this is ingenious. So yeah.
And we actually we all looked at the Pokemon Presents Pokemon Scarlet and Violet a couple of days ago, and that's something that's from someone who's not been heavily into the Pokemon gaming franchise side of things for a long time. I know they've came out with Arcane, and now Scarlet and Violet were more open world, like stories to them and everything. And I'm well, I guess the handheld Game Boy stuff that had stories, but it wasn't like on this scale. And that's something that's actually got my attention, and I'm really interested in. I haven't played Arcane yet, but I'm very interested in that and Scarlet and Violet. And what were your impressions on them going in this direction?
I think you could see. I mean, I've played through and completed Pokemon Shield, which was the first kind of main release on Switch. If you don't include the kind of like Let's Go Pikachu Eevee remakes of Red and Blue. And you could see in this sort of open world section, it almost felt like I don't want to say a prototype, I don't know whether that's quite fair, but you could see that they were testing the waters with that and trying to see how they can make it work, especially with the multiplayer and different things. And then you could see the progression with Pokemon Legends Arceus, I think it is.
Arceus, my bad.
Yeah, it's all right. And I mean, the response I've seen from people, I haven't played Legends, but I've got friends that played it and they really like it. And it doesn't surprise me that they're pushing forward in this way. The concept of it's quite interesting. It reminds me, I mean, we were saying it when we were watching it. It's like Harry Potter. There's two, was there two schools or something of that nature?
Yeah, there's two schools evidently, and you start at one of the schools, and you have teachers and all this kind of stuff. It's like Pokemon meets Harry Potter.
Yeah, I mean, similar to Fire Emblem Three Houses, the kind of an academy situation. I mean, it looks pretty good. I don't know about the legendary that has tires, but also legs. And the tires don't really work. He runs on his legs, and the other one's working fine with his tires, but this one isn't. I question design of that a bit. I mean, he certainly drew the short straw in regards to evolution, hasn't he? I don't think he's best pleased with that. But yeah, I mean, it looks pretty good. I will be picking that one up. We'll see if, I mean, it'd be nice if we could get a review copy. We shall see, but I will be playing it. It's a main installment. It's interesting to see your perspective, because when was the last one you played? Which was the last one you played? How many centuries ago?
Silver, was it? It's been
okay. So
it's been a
before colour
while.
TV.
It's been over. Yeah, it's been a bit. I think I played red, blue, yellow, then silver, and was done. So pretty much any Pokemon after Generation 2, it's kind of like, oh, that's cool. When did it come around? Like 8 years ago? Oh, whoops. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I grew up watching the series and everything, and it's just, I always wanted a game kind of like this, to be honest with you. I kind of want something more with a darker tone. They still have that whole nothing's really ever going to go wrong tone, even though there's monsters literally fighting one another, but whatever. But
Well,
it's
I
still,
guess
it's just,
the problem is you grew up,
right.
you know, and Pokemon still retains its sort of
Innocence.
family-friendly image.
I've always just found it funny. There's the monsters literally beating the hell out of each other, and this is kids show. But all right.
This podcast is not sponsored by Peter, so we apologise for Walt's outbursts. We love the monsters fighting each other. I mean, there was some. I mean, I remember watching Pokemon when I was younger, and I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when it came up on Netflix. I've rewatched the original stuff, and there's some dark moments in it. I think.
Well, Mew and Mewtwo, that movie was a little. Yeah.
Well, the whole idea of Charmander's flame, like going out and then they die or something like that, and like Cubone's mom or something, the ghost, in Lavender Town, was it? I have to admit, I haven't played the original in a long time. And some of the things, like I felt like the Nessie Dragonite, Bill's Lighthouse one was a bit.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah, like there were some moments in the show and in the original games. I mean, Gold and Silver, weren't Team Rocket cutting off Slowpoke tails or something and selling them because they were a high price? So they were kind of dismembering Slowpokes. Or something like that. I can't quite remember, but like, I mean, there's some stuff that's like, damn, that's pretty fucked up. But yeah, yeah. I mean, I understand. Ultimately, Nintendo and Pokemon Company and Game Freak, they're not going to release a darker Pokemon because it doesn't reflect the franchise and the IP's image, and they don't want, like, you've seen how kind of ignorant parents can be. So they don't want, like, we bought this Pokemon for our child and it's got like Pokemon sex in it, and well, I don't know, like this is murder, like this Pokemon murdered this child. He's only 10. He's a trainer. He turned on his trainer because he didn't have a gym badge and broke his skull. Like, and it's like, dude, we wanted a darker theme. All right, we went for it. You know, Walt on this podcast suggested it.
Well, I mean, if someone's not looking at the rating of a game, that's on them. I've always been on that.
But unfortunately, as a company, that saying that to a consumer doesn't, especially ignorant parents, I mean, doesn't really work well. It's like, well, if you didn't check the ratings, actually, and they're like, well, we won't buy from you anymore. Bye bye, and they want their business, right? So it's, I get it. I get the. Also, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, we grow up. And there's a new generation that are coming through that will discover Pokemon and like it like we did.
Yeah, kind of like Power Rangers. I've been begging, can we get an adult Power Rangers for like 20 years, but that's not going to happen.
One of the interesting things about Pokemon is like, I did a radio interview not too long ago, and the demographic that listens to the radio interview was like 50s or over, because it was a local radio station. And they, like, the guy asked me, the radio host asked me, he said, like, so Pokemon was big, you know, in the 90s. So what's the Pokemon of today?
Pokemon.
And yeah, like, you know, he asked me that question. I said, well, it's Pokemon. You know, it's not like Digimon or Beyblade or stuff like that that's just declined and disappeared. Well, Digimon's having a little bit of a resurgence with its games that are doing well, but still nothing compared to Pokemon. Pokemon's just kind of sustained itself when you look at the sales and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's pretty incredible when you think about it. So I just found that kind of like the fact that I could say that to him, like, well, what's kind of still big today? Well, Pokemon. And I think part of that is the fact that they've retained that, like they've done a great job because they're family friendly. But I don't think Pokemon's like, it's not like watching, I don't know, you grow up watching Thomas the Tank Engine. It's not like if you put Thomas the Tank Engine on now and it feels like, dude, I'm 30 years old. What the hell am I watching? If you play Pokemon now, you don't feel like, man, I'm 30 years old. I need to grow up. You just feel like it's a game that's just, it doesn't have swearing in, and it's just a game, right? You don't feel like they're bashing over your head that this is a kid's game. Does that make sense? So when I say like family friendly, I mean it's a game that is appropriate for all ages, because there's complexity in Pokemon with the attributes and the stats and the breeding and things. If you want to deep dive into that kind of turn-based combat and make like mid-max Pokemon and everything else, there's people that do that. And that's not like you're 6 years old playing that game. That's something for someone who's got a bit more of a developed mind and understanding. So I think they do a really good job of appealing to younger audiences and older audiences in the way it's designed, Anyway, there we go. There's my Pokemon deconstruction.
Yeah, I mean, I get all that. It does still feel a slight bit on the kid side with the tone, because it's because there are things that are like, this is kind of an adult thing, but you ignore that. And I mean, I understand why. I mean, it's a gigantic franchise and one of the biggest franchises to ever exist. So I mean, they've done something right over the years. So I mean, can't really argue too hard with them.
Yeah. I mean, you're referring to the tone of the story.
Yeah,
and I guess I'm trying to look at it as like a broader product. And I think that whilst there might be people 30 plus who grew up on the originals wanting something a bit deeper in terms of a story, I think that the gameplay present in the game does have a layer of complexity to it if you want to go there, that is for people who are a bit older or whatever, rather than just the younger child. So I think they find a balance there. But I understand what you're saying, which is not so much about the gameplay; it's more about the
gameplay,
tone of the story.
The way they presented the new gameplay, that looks actually that's what I've wanted for quite a bit of time.
And the multiplayer, looks cool as well. Online multiplayer, you can go around with 4 of you. I can't wait. Me and you going around as 10-year-olds. Finally. I wish my hair would grow back on the top of my head like I was 10. That's great.
Getting beat up by 10-year-olds. That's gonna be fun. But yeah, but that was a good discussion there. And well, yeah, that we can move into there's a big acquisition that may or may not happen based off of regulatory boards and whatnot. Yeah, Microsoft is pushing to buy Activision Blizzard and for $68.7 billion, not million, $billion. And they strategically tried to tell a regulatory board that there was nothing special about Activision Blizzard. And Sony was like, yeah, this might change how people buy consoles and whatnot. And it's just a big ploy by Microsoft to get approval to pay that much money for a gigantic studio, basically. And I mean, do you think this is something that's going to go through? I mean, to me, it's like, I don't really think it's going to change much. If it does, it's just more of a big mega thing that's happening.
To be honest, I'm not in a position to know whether this would go through or not. I haven't been in that kind of space. In regards to Sony's concern about if Call of Duty, I mean, Call of Duty was the main one because Call of Duty is a huge franchise, like one of the biggest grossing franchises, powerhouses in the world, like Star Wars and Harry Potter and everything else. So it's such a big media franchise with like 100 million active players. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's absurd. Their concern is obviously if that's exclusive to Xbox consoles, then obviously that will push people to go to Xbox because it's I just quoted the numbers of players and everything else. And I think, I don't think they're wrong. I mean, like, I think if they do acquire Activision Blizzard, Microsoft, and they do make that franchise exclusive to their Xbox console, at least in the console space, right? I would imagine there are a fair portion of people that will go and purchase an Xbox and instead of a PlayStation. But I mean, whether this acquisition goes through, I don't know. I would assume it probably will. I do find the argument from Microsoft, I mean, they have to make it, I guess, because they're concerned that it might not go through, but it is ludicrous. You're not paying, what was it, 68.7 billion for something that you think's not special. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's that was hilarious when I first saw that. I was like, come on. If that argument actually works, I mean, no, I just don't think Sony really has a leg to stand on. You kind of dominate the console space, so if like even $1 million or $2 million go to Xbox specifically, then who cares? Really? I mean, it's not really hurting you, so you can't really make a monopoly argument on that.
Well, I think it would hurt them in the sense that it would move some players from purchasing PlayStation to purchase Xbox. A monopoly argument, I mean, that's a hard one. There isn't too much between them. I think there's like 10 million, maybe 9 million sales between the two consoles at the moment, or something like that. So whilst PlayStation 5 is doing better than the latest Xbox in regard to overall sales, there isn't too, I mean, like, it's not crazy. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a huge acquisition for Microsoft, isn't it? Activision Blizzard, they're one of the biggest gaming corporations out there. I mean, it's an absurd acquisition, really. When you stop and think about it, it's just. I mean, it's not just Call of Duty though. You're getting World of Warcraft, which is a huge, like, the influential MMORPG that is still, if it's not currently the most subscribed one, it's second. Because I'm not 100% sure of Final Fantasy XIV's subscriber count compared to World of Warcraft, but those two are the top two, and World of Warcraft's, those are a distant 1 and 2 from third place, whatever third place is. I'm sure of that. So it's I mean, to be acquiring something like that is huge, because Warcraft is a huge franchise. I feel like, is Destiny? Is that Activision Blizzard? What else was there? There's Overwatch. I mean, that might give Overwatch 2 a chance to be alive and actually succeed, because it can be part of the Game Pass. So everyone who's got Game Pass can have Overwatch 2, and then they can jump in and there'll be a user base, a player base to experience it. So I think that'll give it a bit of a new lease on life, I guess.
And well, that's pretty much everything that we had planned for this episode. And next week we're going to be talking about our top 5 Final Fantasy games, which will be fun to construct and talk about. And we will definitely be back then.